some sort of package to help with actual bills, because it's fine saying that they're capping the energy, the energy price cap, but more needed to be done in terms of actually offering people help with bills and existing fuel debt.
OK, it's a very good point, Jack. I tell you what, I'm going to bring in Gemma and Greg now. It is a good point, isn't it? Because there has been a package of measures, but still the cost of living is still very, very high, isn't it, Greg?
It is, and of course, while it's true, as Jack says, that the government's capped the energy price guarantee, so the cost of energy won't be going up any further than it already has, the energy bill support scheme is coming to an end now. And so that £400 that every household received over the course of the 6 previous months is finishing at exactly the same time as the price is capped. So in practice, what many households like Jack's are going to experience over the next few months is actually that it will feel like energy is going up in price because the end of that EBSS scheme has coincided with this budget. So it's a mixed picture, and by no means is this an easy time for households, even though we are hoping to see energy bills come down towards the end of the year as prices start to fall.
Gemma, what would you say to Jack?
I think it is a really tough time because what we're seeing is that the majority of people's income is being spent on food and fuel, and because energy costs are going up, it also means food prices are also going up. So this really is a really big impact. So absolutely, underneath the headline of, the energy price guarantee being frozen, taking away that support, that £67 a month, does mean that for people where their bills are around, that are really going to feel that big increase, I think.
And Jack, we're told that inflation is going to fall, so that hopefully does mean prices coming down at some point. Is that kind of any silver lining for you?
I guess it is in the long term, but obviously in the short term, that's like saying that people will carry on breathing. It doesn't offer any sort of stability, and not knowing whether you're actually going to be able to cover all of your bills in the month. It's really hard.
Yeah. I'm sure it is. Jack, we appreciate your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us, and then the best of luck with the year ahead of you. Let's bring in another caller now. Helen is joining us now. Helen's joining in from Dorset this evening. Helen, it's great to have you on the programme. And so when it comes to energy bills and also fuel bills, what's your position, and what did you think of what you heard today from Jeremy Hunt?
I don't, in terms of fuel bills, etc., I don't think it's any good news at all. Essentially, we've still got the height that we got since the autumn catastrophe. I mean, the reason I called in today, if you don't mind me saying, is I was absolutely appalled at the delivery in Parliament today from both sides of the House, but mainly from the Conservative benches, where they were trying to get, in my mind, some glory statements out there from a situation they've actually caused. The focus on getting people back to work is good, but essentially, how are they going to find talented, motivated people to come into roles that are essential, so roles within the education sector, within the medical sector, when right at the moment that they were promising extra breakfast clubs, after school clubs to get people back to work, and who are actually going to fill those roles. Because essentially, as he was making that promise, those people, those hardworking people that are funding with their own money, stationery for schools, etc., are on strike because they can't afford the problems with the rise in gas bills, with the rise in mortgage prices. They can't afford to do their day-to-day job. So how are they going to find these talented people to fill those promises of childcare, education, etc.? And the fact that they were laughing and joking the whole way through the delivery of the budget, I found appalling and wouldn't expect to see in any business environment. So for our government to speak like that, to make quips at the Deputy Speaker, I found the whole delivery of the budget, irrespective of the policies they were promising, just embarrassing from a UK government point of view.
Good point, Helen. Thank you so much. Let's bring Gemma in now. I know you were nodding away with that. What did you make of that? And the delivery as well, because he talked about age, didn't he? Then he mentioned the Deputy Speaker, and I think that didn't go down very well, did it?
No, I don't think it did. I mean, I think the main point he was trying to make is that people that are older have more experience and absolutely should be encouraged to have the same working opportunities. A colleague of mine has been saying that it's not about going from the office chair to the armchair. People do really want to stay engaged in the workforce. But I think what's been hidden in the budget is the fact what we heard from the Office of Budget Responsibility is that we're still going to have another tough 2 years, is that in real terms, disposable income is going to continue to fall. So for every £100 that you have today, you're going to have £94 in 2 years' time. And the two things that were missing from the budget, which absolutely has been picked up on, was number one, what's happening to public sector pay, and secondly, what's happening to people who, because of inflation, because they're being pulled up, things are costing more, and potentially maybe they've got a small pay rise if they're lucky, you know, they're suddenly going into a higher tax bracket, which means naturally they're then paying more tax. So, you know, there isn't any support for people that are really being squeezed, that are just about managing. And I think it's going to be a really tough time, absolutely, in terms of fuel, energy, food and essential goods. And it's great to have, you know, child support, but I agree with you, this is a really serious issue. More people are being pulled into poverty, and it's still a very, very tricky time.
Especially when we hear for the next 2 years is going to be tricky. Helen, thank you so much for that. I'm going to come to you, Greg, in just a few minutes' time, because I want to bring in Joseph now, who's calling in from Sutton, Coldfield. Joseph, I think you're going to be our youngest caller this evening. You're 16 years old. Yeah, so welcome. We're very delighted to have you on the programme. I understand that you're a Labour supporter, but you've actually been impressed by the budget. So, unlike Helen, what did you make of what you heard today?
I have. In terms of what could have been said and what we've seen been said in recent budgets, I do see it as a positive. What stuck out to me is I've been advocating for a lot of mental health support, and the £10 million that Jeremy Hunt said will go into suicide prevention really impressed me today. Also, the raise in defence spending, how we can look into the camera and promise no recession and even a 1.8% growth increase in the economy next year did impress me.
Okay, has it impressed you enough to change your vote yet, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it is hard to trust a Tory MP in recent times, I will say. It won't be changing my vote. Obviously, I'm 16, so in the coming years I probably will be still voting.
A couple of years.
I probably still will be voting Labour, but...
Right, OK. Interesting, though. Really, really interesting point of view. Greg, what do you think?
I'm fascinated by this real tension between the experience that many people are having. But we know that if you look at sort of the rates of fuel poverty, what's happening to people, especially on lower incomes right now, how large a proportion of people's incomes are being absorbed by paying for food, as Gemma says, paying for energy bills. And the tension between that and this kind of jocular, joking tone in Parliament, I think a lot of Jeremy Hunt's jokes might have gone down very well in Parliament, but probably don't go down very well across the country at large. And certainly this afternoon, you know, Sam was in Burnley talking to people, and they were not impressed either by the tone or the substance. So it's good to know that some people are impressed by some of those more symbolic measures, like the increase in defence spending and the allocation of more resources to mental health. And, of course, we have to welcome those as we do things like the childcare initiatives that were announced today. But there is this real challenge. A lot of households are so hard up at the moment that it's really hard to listen to those positive messages when you're really feeling the pinch.
Joseph, thank you so much for your call. We're going to go straight now to Lucy. She's calling in from Stratford-upon-Avon. Lucy, what did you make of what you heard today?
I just think they're very out of touch. Our MP is Nadine Zahawi, and obviously he's had all these tax irregularities in January. He's a multimillionaire, and I don't really understand how he can stay in touch with us. You know, food inflation's up 16%, my bills are up 26%, and I live on my own, so I don't have someone else paying half the bills, and I'm just wondering when it's going to go down.
What would you like to have heard? I mean, what could make your life better, would you say?
I get 25% off my council tax bill for being single, but I really think it should be 50%. But I think the main problem is, until this war ends in Ukraine and gas and energy goes back to normal, hopefully, I don't think it's going to end. It's just going up and up and up.
OK, let's see if we can get some help or some advice, Lucy, from both our experts who are in the studio here. I mean, Gemma, is there anything that people can do right now, barring what the government was saying today?
I mean, what the government is hoping for is that come July, energy prices are going to be falling. And we've started to see that come off. Obviously, then we also enter the summer. People are using less heat to be able to, warm their homes as well. So hopefully there will be a bit of a respite come the summer. But just coming back to the point that was made, there is a tax on single people. It's not a 50% if you are on your own. You know, people that are in couples, they do have certain tax breaks, and also they have a lot of their costs that they can split with somebody else. So I agree that there should be, especially when people are, single parents as well, having an extra level of support, I think, is going to be really important. So, look, as with everything, it's always a case of listen out, read the fine print of what's been announced today, see if there is any further support coming, especially around, when people have children, around childminders. But I do think that if people are on their own right now, it is very hard, and just trying to get to the summer is going to be the focus.
Greg?
I was just looking earlier on today, suicide rates have risen by 3% since the start of the cost of living crisis. And things like the squeeze on people's energy bills, the cost of food, these are costs you can't get away from. I mean, turning the heat off is just not an option in a cold weather spell, particularly for people who are elderly, or people who are infirm, or people with younger children. So, look, the reality is this is a very tough time for many households. It's going to be tough even if inflation comes down. Inflation, of course, is a measure of the rate at which prices increase. But even if inflation does fall as much as the Chancellor has said that they're hoping it will, down below 3% by the end of the year, 3% inflation still means prices are going up, but just less quickly than they have been. So there's a lot of pain and suffering still to come. Is the government doing enough? Well, the government's trying to say that it's doing enough, but while inflation remains so high, and crucially, while tax thresholds aren't increasing, even though earnings are increasing, households are still getting squeezed. And as Gemma said earlier on, the OBR's data says that they have never had in the history of their data reporting such a sharp squeeze on household budgets.
Just very briefly.
Just very quickly, the silver lining is that savings rates are going up, so you can actually earn a little bit of interest on your money, and I'd say just try and make your money. It's tiny, but make it try and work.
OK, Lucy, thank you very much. Really good point there. And we're going to continue with this theme with the cost of living, of course, and energy prices. I'd like to bring in Anastasia now. Anastasia, you're calling from London. I know, Anastasia, you have cerebral palsy. You've got an awful lot on your plate as well. Tell us kind of your situation and what you heard today and what you'd like to hear.
Yes, I do have thank you. Hello. I do have an awful lot on my plate, and it's true. I've got cerebral palsy and other health conditions. I would also like to see a copy of the disability white paper. And it is true. I really don't believe that people should laugh when it comes to finances. It's just not appropriate. And people with disabilities, it's very complicated. I mean, the money that we had previously it really isn't sufficient. I mean, electric beds, electric wheelchairs, people, machinery to stay alive. It's just really, really difficult. And also, there's something else. Unfortunately, I actually have a care background as well, so I don't have any relatives. I don't have any network whatsoever. So things are incredibly difficult for me. I just we'll see what happens in reality. I'd like to get into politics if I had the opportunity to try and make some changes.
Good for you. That's what the country needs, people like you. I mean, just very quickly, the two issues he did really focus on when it comes to disability work, I mean, abolishing the work capability assessment for disability, people disabled, or disabilities, I should say, and the launch of universal support. I suppose this is a scheme to try and get people with disabilities into the workforce if they want to. Is that something you'd be interested in?
It's something that I would be interested in, but the system is not. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. It's very difficult to navigate, and sometimes it's just platitudes. We need to go beyond words and have some action. But I think it's a good idea to test systems out, to test the reality, because I would like to say there's an advert on TV that's doing circulation.
OK, Anastasia, tell you what, let's bring in our experts now. Greg, you've been nodding in agreement there. Very powerful story from Anastasia. What would you like to say?
It is. So, look, I mean, we heard today about the universal support scheme, this new scheme, which supposedly will make up to £4,000 available for disabled people who are seeking to return to the workforce or enter the workforce. Now, how will that work? Who will it be applicable to? And, of course, not all people in this situation are able to return to the workforce. I very much hope, given, Anastasia, your lucidity and articulacy, I very much hope that support scheme is available to help you go into politics. Because clearly, voices like yours aren't being heard enough, and I think it's great that you have that interest. And let's hope that schemes like this work. And that's, I think, the proof will be in the pudding over the next few years.
Gemma, very briefly, did you want to come in?
I think the thing that was good in the budget was trying to separate out somebody's ability to work with somebody's eligibility for benefits, which means that people that are disabled, have certain health issues, are still confident enough to be able to try and search for work and not feel like it's going to endanger the benefits that they absolutely need.
OK, Gemma, thank you very much. And just as a quick reminder, you can still call in. The number is 0208-167-2200. So call in within this next hour and we'll do our best to get you onto the air and talk to our experts if you've got any views or comments regarding today's statement. Now, talking about today's announcements, the Chancellor also had a very big thing to say about childcare. Working parents in England will be able to get free childcare for children ages 9 months and above from September 2025, so you've got to wait a little bit. It's a move aimed to get more parents back into the workplace. Is the plan deliverable, though? Let's get your views. I'm delighted to say Sharon joins us now this evening. Sharon, you're calling in from South West London, so you're just around the corner from where we are now. What did you make of what you heard about childcare today?
Hi, and thank you. So I think that any improvement in the budget is sorely needed and very welcome, but I'm really disappointed that this support isn't coming fast enough. So as you said, the real support to parents is 2.5 years away. It's September 25 that they'll get the 30 hours of childcare from children 9 months old and above. And the worry for me is that means women will continue to be locked out of the workforce because they can't afford childcare. An estimated 500,000 to 1.7 million mothers are locked out already. And so we're going to miss out on the economic contribution that these women could make at a time that the economy needs that contribution and at a time when employers have skill gaps and roles that they can't fill. So I'm disappointed about the budget.
Sharon, Jeremy Hunt says, he said, delayed it a little bit so the system can catch up, so capacity can be created and get nursery places. Does that wash with you?
I do understand that because you can't open up the numbers when the supply isn't there. One of the real issues at the moment is adequate supply of childcare. But I do think he could bring forward the support to childcare providers, early year providers. It's staggered at the moment. Part will come in September, part will come next year. He could bring that forward to this year so that we could get a bit of a head start in sorting out the supply issues.
Sharon, let's bring in Greg and Gemma, get their views as well. I mean, Greg, this was meant to be the big rabbit, wasn't it? The rabbit out the hat that kind of got leaked the day before, we think, in terms of the issues of childcare. I mean, Sharon raises a good point. Once you dig into it, it's actually a bit more complicated than the headline suggests. And
it's phased, exactly as Sharon says. So, yes, by September 25, this support will be available for those younger children, 1 and 2 years. It's already available, of course, to 3 and 4-year-olds, but it will be extended to younger children. This is important. So the group Pregnant Then Screwed estimates that 1 in 4 working mothers spend more than 75% of their income on childcare at the moment.
Is it the most expensive in Europe?
It's the most expensive childcare in any major economy in Europe. And so, it's a situation where there are very limited incentives for mums to go back into the workplace after they have their children. And so, look, clearly this is the right direction of travel. I think there'd be very few people who would challenge that. Why it's going to take so long to implement and what can be done in the meantime, I don't know. And it's a shame that we're not seeing this happen even sooner, but at least we can welcome that it is happening.
Gemma, what do you think?
I think also, if you look into the fine print, which is obviously the most important thing, there are a couple of restrictions around. As we know, it's only going to be available to people where everybody in the household works for a minimum of 16 hours a week. But also, you've also got, it's only going to apply for 36 weeks of the year. Most people work for at least 48 weeks of the year. And the third thing is the wraparound care, obviously, is only going to be available then during term time, which still doesn't help with school holidays. Now, I don't want to be too negative on it because I think it is a big leap forward. But it does mean that there's a huge amount of issues that need to be worked out to really give the support that people are going to need.
A leap forward, but some issues there. Sharon, thank you. We really appreciate your thoughts. We're also going to invite Julie in to join us now. Julie, you're calling in from West Yorkshire. I know you've also got a really good point to make tonight, and that's regarding childminders. They are sorely missed, aren't they, as a workforce in this country right now. What's the point you'd like to make?
There's a couple of points I'd like to make. My daughter's a teacher, works full-time. I look after a little boy who's 2 years old, and she will never be able to get any funding through me because she can't get funding for a family member. which I think's been missed somewhere, because she would have to send him to another setting to be able to get the funding. So she'd have to move him from me to another setting, even when he gets to 3 and 4 year old.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I tell you what, I reckon we could try and get some help for you on that, Julie. So if you're a family member and you're caring for your grandchild or, you know, a niece or nephew, what is the situation with being paid as a childminder?
Well, I mean, there isn't. That's the problem, is that it's really targeted on the parent. It's interesting because I started to do some research on this because 1 in 4 families actually rely on their parents or the grandparents to look after their children. And really the only thing that's in place is there's something known as transferring your national insurance credits to the grandparents. But if you do that, it's just a transfer. It's not additional support. And again, I wouldn't be recommending that. I'm just saying that's the only thing that's in play at the moment. So I think, you know, what we heard today is that there's going to be payments made for people that decide to become childminders. So £600 or, you know, double that amount if it's done through an agency. So hopefully that will increase the amount, because we've seen the number of childminders fall by about 9%, you know, over the last year or so. And they are a flexible, affordable way to be able to help people get back to work, which is really important. But really, when it comes to grandparents that are such a good source of care, there isn't enough support that's there, really.
Julie, has that answered your questions? I mean, ideally, what would you like to happen?
Well, I'm not a grandparent, just a grandparent. I've been a childminder for 27 years myself.
Right.
So I've got other children in my care. I've got, you know, quite a few children in my care. So I'm doing it as a childminder, not as a grandparent, but he can't get the funding.
But you can't get the funding. Greg, you'd like to bring in...
I was just going to ask, so the other thing we've heard about is this increase in minimum staffing ratios from 1 to 4 to 1 to 5. And the idea being, of course, that if you increase the staffing ratios, it will enable childminders to take on more children at the same time. So I was just interested to ask Julie whether you have any opinions about whether that's likely to be an effective move.
No, because I don't think we can give the quality of care to the children that we would have. I think the ratios are right how they are. I think we need to keep the quality of care there.
So the ratios you think should stay the same, but you're looking for more funding?
I think the funding should be, if you're not just a grandparent and you are doing it as a business, you've got other children on roll, then grandparents should be allowed to get access to funding for their grandchildren.
Okay. Julie, thank you. Thank you very much. Really good points that you've been making there. Let's also speak now to Julie, who's joining us from southwest London, I believe. No, Connie, excuse me, we've spoken to Julie already. Connie, welcome to the programme. You are calling from southwest London this evening.
Yes, I am.
And yeah, great to have you on the programme. What did you think about the childcare package that was introduced today?
It was something quite positive, and we were looking forward to it. When it was all leaked out that there was going to be 30 hours free childcare, my daughter was very excited because she's on maternity leave at the moment. Her baby's 6 months old. But of course, when it all boils down to it, this won't really kick in for her until September 2025, which seems a long way off. It's a positive step, but it's just a shame that it's going to take all that time. I mean, we're talking about children that are not even born at the moment. So as a grandparent, I've helped my son out in the past with childcare when his children were younger. But my daughter lives in the Midlands, and I've even considered, would I sell up and go and live there to try and help them? That's a very drastic step. But I feel disappointed, and I think it's a positive thing, but I just wish it would come into force just that bit quicker, because, you know, September 2025 is a long way off, and from September 24, there's only 15 hours that will be available to extend it to all children from 9 months old.
And,
so again,
and Connie, sorry to interrupt you, Connie. You say that your daughter's keen to get back to work, but at the moment she can't, or she's not.
She's on maternity leave at the moment, but she'll be going back to work shortly. But she'll only go back part-time because the childcare costs are so high. You know, she'll be working for virtually nothing and having sort of 2 hours journey every day, which she's willing to do. But it just seems so unfair when you've got a job, you're keen to get back to it, you want to do what's right by your child as well, and then obstacles are in your way, and it's cost. So, as I say, we were so pleased to hear about this 30 hours. We were over the moon. But of course, the downside is that it won't kick in for quite a while. And I just feel that's something that should be looked at. It's quite urgent. And, you know, when people are willing to go to work and people are needed in their jobs, then the path should be made clear for them to do that.
Yeah, Connie, very eloquently put. Thank you so much. I'm sure your grandchildren or grandchild will be pretty grown up in a couple of years' time, won't they? But and this is a really good point, isn't it, Gemma? This you know, for children who are maybe not even born yet, this is kind of who they're focusing on over the next couple of years.
Absolutely. The lag is the big problem, is that this isn't going to come really soon enough for so many hard-working families. If you think about it, you know, we need to get more people back working into the economy as well. There's a huge talent shortage. You know, these are people that are very, very highly skilled that want to go back to work. And it's a real shame that it's going to take so long. We know the reason why. The government said that it's because there needs to be a lag to encourage, to let the supply catch up with the demand. But still, there were other things that could have been done to really help that, especially as we saw that there is support for childminders. You know, again, if there's more incentive to get people to go back and work in nurseries, then potentially you could have actually accelerated the supply issue to match the demands and had a solution sooner. So my heart goes out because I think it's a real shame to have somebody that really wants to work and just can't because of childcare issues.
OK, Gemma, thank you so much. Greg, thank you too. You're staying with us. You're not going anywhere because we've got more callers coming up in a few minutes' time after this short break. Do stay with us. Hi there, welcome back. A very good evening to you. You're watching The Budget Your Say. Now, we are taking your calls today about today's budget and answering your points with our experts, Greg Marsh and Gemma Godfrey, who are in the studio primed with all their facts and figures to try and help you out a little bit. Just to let you know, 020-8167 2200 is a number for you to call. Do get your calls in as soon as you can, and we'll do our best to get you on air this evening, right up until 8 o'clock tonight. Well, let's now talk about the government's plans to grow the economy economy by boosting businesses and their workers. Now, we heard the Chancellor talk an awful lot about the economic inactive today and his attempts to get more people back into the workforce. I think he cited the 1 million plus job vacancies that are out there at the moment. We'd love to get your calls on that. And in fact, we've got Nick who's calling in right now from Sheffield. Nick, I understand that you're a small business owner and you've certainly got concerns about that and also about the strike action that we saw, mass strike action today. What would you like to say?
I certainly have. Thanks, Emma. Yeah, I think for me, the government's trying to get more people into work, but we've got a massive amount of people that are currently striking. And I was quite saddened not to hear anything in the budget that was going to be portioned for them. I think we would have a much stronger economy if all the strikes were not happening and the economy could get to a position of being able to recover from all the strike action that we've seen over the last few months. It was quite disappointing that there wasn't anything in there, strikers.
Nick, you make a really good point. I noticed that too, actually, that given that there was a great protest outside Westminster, I think it was the biggest industrial action to date, teachers, we know NHS doctors, tube strikers, and yet nothing really on strike action from Jeremy Hunt. Did that surprise you too, Greg?
Well, Jeremy Hunt's contention is that this is really about inflation, right? The reason that there is labour dispute, industrial turmoil is because inflation is so high. It's therefore to hear the government make the case it's impossible to raise earnings as much as inflation's increased, and that's what puts pressure on people's living standards. So if you believe that this budget is going to help bring inflation down, rather than that mainly being due to market forces and things like energy prices falling, then I guess the government is trying to help, but it's trying to help indirectly. I suppose if you don't believe that, if you don't think that these budget measures are going to reduce inflation, then yes, this is sort of the elephant in the room that Jeremy Hunt doesn't want to talk about.
Gemma, what would you say?
The big issue that we have is that the price of living is going up so much faster than wages, and to not hear anything at all about raising public sector wages was actually a real shock. I mean, there was a rumour that he was going to come out with, I think it was a 5% or a certain level, which wouldn't have actually surprised markets because that's very reasonable given how much the price of living has actually risen. So it was a shock and a shame, and there isn't enough support there.
OK, Nick, we appreciate your thoughts tonight there. Nick joining us from Sheffield. Let's join Charlotte now. Charlotte, you're calling in from London. You're an NHS doctor, and so an awful lot to talk to you about. What did you make of the views and the Jeremy Hunt's budget today?
Hello, good evening.
Hi.
I've worked as a doctor for nearly 8 years, but also, interestingly, I've been a patient myself recently as well. I found the budget overall gravely disappointing from both perspectives, that the NHS seems to have been completely ignored. It's sad, but from a very personal perspective, and I know that I share this with many of my colleagues, the NHS just doesn't work in a way that we've all been so immensely proud of for so very long. And essentially to have sidelined this and not made it a priority in any sense is really disappointing. Morale is at an all-time low, not just amongst doctors, but the whole healthcare workforce. Their sector is hemorrhaging employees, and naturally, patients are frustrated too. I have been myself recently, and this has just been ignored in this budget almost completely.
Yeah, and our previous caller made a very good point as well about that in terms of strike action. I mean, what could he say to make things better for you? What would you like to hear as a doctor, but also as a patient of the NHS?
That's a great question, and it's not an easy, it's not an easy answer, a question to answer. Pay increases need to happen across the board, and I'm not just saying that as a doctor, but I fully support nurses and public sector workers across the board. But we also need to maintain the workforce that we have, and part of that is pay, but also conditions. Lots of people don't know, but getting annual leave as a doctor is almost impossible. People can't get time off for their own weddings, let alone a honeymoon or anything like that, which, there's just basic things that keep your morale up and make you feel valued as a member of an organisation, as an employee.
OK, Charlotte, thank you. I tell you what, let's bring in Gemma and Greg now. It is interesting, Greg, because we didn't hear anything about the police, anything about the NHS. We heard very little about house building, all these areas of budgets normally are kind of jam-packed with. What do you think of that?
My sister is a GP,
right.
so I get this at weekends from her, and I think, look, there's no question, right? NHS workers have had an enormously tough 18 months. That's one of the reasons why, for the first time I can recall, we're seeing NHS workers on strike. I mean, that's an extraordinary idea, the idea that people in such a critical role would see the need to take to the streets. So there's clearly a lot of sentiment about this, and I, like Gemma, was disappointed and surprised that there wasn't more direct intervention here. But on the other hand, again, I'm not here to defend the government's record about this. I think what Jeremy Hunt would say is that you can't increase salaries without fueling inflation. And so if the real ill here, or the evil, is to try to temper inflation, then that's why the government feels tension on this issue. The only measure we did here, which arguably helps a certain number of NHS workers, is potentially the change to pension provision to allow those older NHS workers on higher salaries to create the incentives for them to remain in the workforce for a bit longer. That's clearly not going to do all that much for most NHS workers, although it might help a little bit on the margin for some of the elder and more senior NHS workers.
Keen to bring you in, Gemma, in just a minute, but let's just ask Charlotte that question. I don't know if you heard that from Greg, Charlotte. There was a little bit of the NHS and pensions. Actually, Charlotte's gone, so maybe we'll speak to her after. But I tell you what we'll do now is we'll bring in Alan. He's calling in from London, and I know, Alan, you've got an opinion on terms of the workforce and this so-called economic inactivity and 1 million vacancies which are currently out there. Were you cheered by what you heard today?
Well, I think the good news was that we've had a somewhat of a return to what we call in the 1980s supply-side economics. We've had a lot of economically inactive people. Some of it was down to the lifetime pension allowance, which discouraged people from continuing to work. And that's really unfortunate because some of the most productive years are towards the end of one's career. And it also impacted a lot of doctors. I know that was certainly a subject we've been talking about. And we can't afford to see a lot more doctors leave. And giving them the possibility of continuing to save for their pension, I think, is an important factor. So they say, well, if 55% is going to be taken away from me in tax, what's the point of me continuing to work? I understand that. And also, I think the fact that they're allowing, they're incentivizing people who are at home with children to get back in the workforce is also very, very important. We need to increase the supply of labor. We have shortages of labor. We've had shortages of goods, but certainly those measures that he took today, incentivizing the workforce to get back into jobs, I think is very important. Also, we need to make sure that the older people are at work so that they can pass on their knowledge to the younger generation. Without that, how are we going to get the continuity?
Alan, good point. Thank you very much. So a positive note there from our caller, Alan, in terms of these measures to try and get more people back into the workforce, Gemma. Will they work, do you think?
I mean, I think the challenge is that during the pandemic, we saw a lot of people fall outside, out of the workforce because there were illnesses, there were people that were laid off, there were people that became carers for family members. And one of the issues, if we look at, talking about public sector jobs, is while the pension reform is great for, as we said, older doctors to stay, it's not going to solve the supply issue that we need to get more people to be attracted to the industry to start their careers. Because one of the issues that we heard earlier on is that people's working conditions are just awful. It's not just they want more money to go on holiday. Absolutely not. It's not just money to be able to survive. It's also the ability to have more people in the industry so that people can take breaks, so that people can actually, there's enough capacity to look after patients adequately. but also not causing a big mental health strain, I think, on a lot of doctors and nurses that are completely overworked, that have been since the pandemic. It's a real, I think, a systematic issue.
OK, Gemma, thanks very much. Alan, they're focusing on the over 50s, very important part of the workforce. So our next caller, Benjamin, completely at the other end of the scale. Benjamin, you're at Newcastle University. I know that you're definitely one of our younger callers tonight. Welcome to you. What are your thoughts and concerns this evening regarding the budget?
Well, I'm a student. I've applied for a maintenance loan. I get the maintenance loan, and the next lump sum is about to come in at the end of April. But there's been no measures there to help with that increasing with inflation. It stays the same despite the increase with inflation. So, despite the great bits of the budget that help with childcare and the energy and stuff, there's nothing really that is aimed at students like me who have a maintenance loan. There's nothing to help them, really, that I can see with the coming months. Perhaps I understand that the Chancellor said that inflation will go down in the long run, but in the short run, there really isn't anything that I can see helping me with my maintenance loan.
Are you feeling overlooked, Benjamin?
Overlooked, perhaps because students generally don't vote Conservative, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know, but it doesn't help me, really.
OK, well, let's get some views, Benjamin. For now, thank you so much. I mean, again, students and, student maintenance loans not mentioned at all in the budget this time around.
No. So, I mean, to the extent that students are more likely to be less well paid at the earlier stages of their career, of course, we have seen an increase in the minimum wage. So, to the extent that either students are expecting to be earning at the minimum wage when they enter the workforce, or maybe are earning at the minimum wage as part of a part-time job while they're studying, they're at least going to benefit from the cost of living, the inflationary increase to minimum wage levels. But no, nothing else today for students in a direct sense. That's right.
I think what was surprising as well is that we didn't hear anything about apprenticeships. They have been talked about previously, and they're such a fantastic way to get people into the workforce, give them a job, real-life training in certain areas where we need certain skills, moving away from the more academic to much more hands-on practical skills to fill the gaps that we have at the moment in our workforce. And so that would have been a little bit more welcome.
Unless
as well,
you're over 50 and then they want you to go back.
Yes, which I think is fantastic.
The other end, yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about it in a moment. But first, let's welcome Colette. She's calling from Nottingham this evening. Colette, welcome to the programme. Great to have you on board. I know that you are a small business owner, or you're involved with small businesses. So did you hear anything on that front that you were happy about or not happy about?
Well, there's a couple of things I heard, really, and one just touching on what you just mentioned there. Firstly, I work for the Hair and Barber Council. We're the de facto regulator for the hair and beauty industry. The budget was incredibly disappointing. I didn't hear small business mentioned once. I sat with my hands in my head in despair. We've been disregarded through COVID, disregarded in cost of living crisis, and disregarded again. Employees in our industry are near extinction because we have an unlevel playing field, huge amounts of disguised employment, and no enforcement. And this has also put thousands upon thousands of apprenticeships at risk and thousands out of jobs. The second thing is they talked about smart regulation for AI, which is brilliant. However, we currently have a sector of an underground market that's absolutely been allowed to flourish through COVID is huge. And we have absolutely, I don't know if you know this, but the hair and barbering and beauty sector is not regulated. So anybody can cut your hair, use chemicals that are actually included in the Poisons Act, and inject you in a kitchen. But yet we'll regulate AI, but we won't regulate things that could actually harm the consumer or worse.
Colette, I can hear you. You're very cross. I can hear your frustration. So let's, and fair enough. OK, Gemma, Greg, let's bring you in now. Greg, I think, Gemma, you spoke last. So, Greg, to you, I mean, really good points from Colette there. And again, quite a lot about big business, right? Big investment zones and the likes. What about SMEs? Because SMEs, as we know, the likes of Colette, they are the backbone of the British economy, aren't they?
Well, so the only good news is slightly insulated from that rising corporation tax. So if your profits exceed $250,000, your corporation tax will rise all the way to 25% effective April. Smaller businesses are more insulated from that corporation tax rise. But apart from that, no, this was not particularly a budget, at least as I understood it, that was aimed at those small business owners and operators. And so there are those operators are facing very significant pressures, as we hear.
Yeah, OK, Colette, well, we wish you well for the future. Do keep in touch and let us know how you're getting on, because we're going to move on now to talk about pensions and support for older people. We've talked a lot already tonight about the focus that we've seen today on scrapping the lifetime allowance designed to keep experienced professional workers in the workforce, namely talking about NHS doctors. But, of course, the number of them is proportionally small. What about the wider pension demographic in this country? Was there anything for them? Well, John is calling in now. John, you're from Norfolk. You're 73 years old. I hope you don't mind me telling everyone your age.
Well, it's too late now if I did, but good evening, Emma.
Well, I could tell you my age as well if it makes you feel any better. I'm not far behind you.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, go on, carry on. I've seen you on the
very
telly.
Good. What did you think of today's budget? I mean, what thoughts do you have?
Well, just one of the things is I'd like to know what happened to the triple lock on state pensions. It was cancelled last year and we were led to believe it was being reinstated this year, but no mention of it today. Has it been cancelled again or has it been conveniently forgotten?
Right, let's get straight to that. Gemma, what is going on? No, again, no mention of it.
No mention. It was temporarily dropped, but it was reinstated at the last budget, so that's good news. And just to help everybody out, so the triple lock means that the state pension will increase by the higher of either 2.5%, the rise in wages, or the rise in inflation. And the government said last time that it would rise with inflation, which is really, really good news. So actually, in this case, no news is good news. Greg?
That's right. So that's right. So state pension recipients are going to see an inflationary increase. That's a CPI increase in their state pension rates, as are universal credit recipients. So there are a couple of communities who are, I think, favourably treated by today's announcement. There's no bad news for those groups. Those are the expected levels of those rises. OK.
John, thanks for coming on. I hope that answered your question. We're going to go straight to our next caller now. Martin, he's joining us. And Martin, I understand you're unhappy with government support for veterans. I mean, they were mentioned, weren't they? But maybe not enough. Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on. They said about 30 million for veterans. From what I hear, they didn't say how long that was actually over, which works out about £16 per veteran, which is just laughable. And for myself, I was receiving a lower standard of occupation. I was given 3 days' notice and now losing £75 a week on my war pension just because of some sort of clerical error or something, I don't know. But I was given 3 days' notice to say I was going to lose £75 a week, and now that's happened today.
And that is a huge amount of money, £75 a week. I mean, let's see if we can get you some help. Gemma, what would you like to say?
I mean, I don't have any help for that specific reason, apart from just, recommending to go and speak to somebody, because that sounds, as you said, a clerical error, and it sounds like it shouldn't be going on. But I do think, veterans were mentioned in the budget, but again, this is where headline is being confused with actually the detail on a pragmatic level. A number sounds really big, the amount of money that they're going to be using to support veterans, but the way it trickles down, there isn't enough clarity on that, how it's really going to help people. I mean, they mentioned help with housing, but what about, people that need much broader help than that?
Yes, all we know is £33 million, which is going to be towards a housing fund, but we don't know the details. That's right.
OK. All right, Martin, well, thank you. And we wish you the best of luck. Do keep in touch as well. And if there's anything we can do, then do keep in touch. So we're going to move on now to speak to Gerri. Gerri's calling in from northwest London. And Gerri, what is your situation, if you don't mind telling us? And what did you think of today's budget?
We are actually both pensioners. My husband will be 73 tomorrow and myself 73 next month, and we have custody of 2 of our young grandchildren. We didn't think very much of the budget at all. I find it extremely confusing because we had a letter from the DWP 2-3 days ago to tell us that we would not be getting basically, not in these words, but we wouldn't be getting the pension rise because it will be deducted from our pension credit. This morning, we got a letter saying that our pension credit isn't going to change. So that's confusing us. And the other thing that affects us very much, especially as we've got 2 young children here, is the energy thing. We're told that energy prices are coming down for the big companies. The big companies are calling energy prices cash machines for them. And we're told that we have to continue paying this rate, even though the prices are coming down, because they block buy their energy in advance. So if that is true, when the prices start to go up, Why do our prices go up immediately when by their own say-so, they're block buying and they've still got that at the cheaper price, for people?
Gerri, you have hit a question and a point that I've heard many times, and it's a very valid one, and that's, of course, the difference in wholesale energy prices and then the prices that consumers pay. Quick to go up, less quick to come down. I mean, what do you think, Gemma? Do you think that as inflation falls and energy prices fall, we will see house prices, or energy prices, I should say, fall quickly too, or not?
Well, I think the big issue is that over the next few months, people are going to see their bills go up by £67 a month. So people are going to see it go up because that energy support is being taken out. So the fact that the cap is being frozen, but actually the support is being taken out, means that people are going to be hit for the next few months. Then, of course, as the prices go down, we would hope that it would feed through. But these things happen as a lag. We see that in banks as well. Interest rates rise. They don't necessarily follow on by offering people better savings rates, but they will charge you more for your mortgage. So, there will be a lag, and I think people will be squeezed in the meantime.
Shocked, I tell you, shocked. The businesses should act so cynically. No, I mean, look, there's something else going on here around energy prices, which is complicated and a bit strange, but it's really important to call it out, which is that Ofgem, the energy sector regulator, is actually discouraging energy companies right now from aggressively competing on price, because they want to make sure that there are no more failures of energy companies, right? We saw all those companies fail when the wholesale energy prices spiked and companies like Bulb and so on went under. So Ofgem has actually implemented a scheme to discourage energy prices from undercutting each other. Might stabilise the market, but the effect of that on private individuals is actually that as prices come down on the wholesale markets, it's less likely that we're going to see aggressive price competition in the energy markets for retail buyers, for end households. So there's a real tension here. Should we be solving for stability in the energy market, or should we be trying to bring down household prices as fast as possible? I would argue Ofgem's not doing enough here. Now, that's not to do with the budget, but it is to do with the way that energy is regulated in this country. OK, Gerri, thank you so much for your call. We wish you luck, and also a happy birthday to your husband for tomorrow. Let's bring in Hilary now, calling from Lincolnshire. Hilary, tell us your situation. I believe that you are... Oh, well, forgive me. Are you a pensioner or not? You have to let me know. And that you feel that you're worse off now than before the budget. Is that right?
Yes, I'm a pensioner, and yes, I'm going to be worse off from the 1st of April, without a doubt. Yeah. And I don't believe that the budget today has made any help for me at all in any way. If I can just say, a moment earlier you were talking about the increase in the pension by 10%, which is great, but now I've been put into the tax bracket above the personal allowance, which means I'm going to pay £80 a month in tax. So I'm, £20 a month worth off before I even start. And that's not including all the price rises with the food, the shopping, and the gas and the electric. I mean, my gas bill has gone up from £43 to now £139. Now, the government's paying part of that, but they're withdrawing the help from that as well. So everything, for me, is just going downwards, really. And I continually hear people talking about disposable income. What disposable income? I haven't got any left. It's all gone.
Yeah. Which is tough. Hilary, it's very, very tough. Gemma, you're nodding as well in agreement.
Because
Any thoughts,
I think,
Hilary?
Absolutely. I think Hilary has just described very aptly exactly the problem, which is people are spending more, so prices are rising, but you're being dragged into spending more and being charged more on tax, because if your state pension does go up and you suddenly are in a higher tax bracket, then you're being taxed more. And so this is the income squeeze that really hasn't been addressed in the budget. OK, Hilary, we wish you well. Let's bring in Masie. Very briefly, you're our last caller, Masie, from Hertfordshire. Tell us what you thought about the budget today and how you're doing individually.
To be perfectly honest, I didn't see the whole of the budget, so that's the first thing to say. Secondly, I really do. I always come from a point of gratitude, because I think, as sort of living with little most of my life, anything that comes my way, I'm very thankful for. I'm 69, and I realised last year that I'm going to have to go back to work to make this situation work, because it's either that or I'm going to have to give up my home. I try not to move back with my kids, because I don't think they'd be terribly happy about that, and I wouldn't blame them. But it's really going to be a case of going back to work because I get 2 pension payments a month, amounting to 740, and
Masie?
all of that is going out. Yeah.
We appreciate your views. Thank you so much for joining us on this programme, and the best of luck as well for the future. That is sadly all we've got time for. Thank you to Greg and Gemma for your expertise. You've been fantastic. And, of course, all of you have called in to have your say. Do stay with us here on Sky News. Full coverage analysis of the budget throughout the evening. Coming up next, it's Sky News Tonight.